Hey everyone, my name is David Dunbar, the theme park evangelist, and now it is time for tonight's main awesome discussion topic: the rise and fall of Test Track. What happened to it? Well, Test Track was opened back in 1998, but I'm going to check just to make sure. I stand corrected. March 17th, 1999. I apologize. Maybe I should get my information right first before I start YouTubing. I got called out on that once, so I understand. Anyway, so Test Track opened on March 17th, 1999, and it got redone later in 2012. As of December 6th, 2012, that's when Test Track 2.0 came into existence. But here's something interesting for you. The original opened back on March 17th of 1999. It lasted a very long time. I personally did not start riding Test Track until about 2001, 2002, 2003. I rode on the original quite a few times. I rode it quite a bit until they refurbished it in March 14th or something like that of 2012. It was only closed for about 9 months, which is still an extensive amount of time. But if it comes down to it, Test Track really just got a retheme. It really didn't get redone much, other than they took out all of the stuff that made it look like a GM testing facility to um, more or less they not only partnered with Chevrolet, but they wanted the attraction to have more of a modern kick to it. And they also wanted it to be more interactive, and that's why they enabled that ability for guests to be able to design their own cars. And honestly, for the longest time, it did come across that way. But going back to the early 2000s, I feel like Test Track, the original, was at its peak in the 2000s. I remember going to Test Track and getting fast passes for it, and the attraction was always super popular. The fast passes were pretty much gone for the majority of the day, and just the fact that it was always had a long line. I always had at least a hour, 2 hour long line. The single rider line has been there since 1999. Nothing new about that. I never really did the single rider line until 2.0 came along. Why is that? Because of the fact that I was too young when the original opened to really be able to enjoy it, versus when 2.0 came along, I was a lot older, so I could go and enjoy it by myself. But as far as the original goes, I also remember there was a lot more colored cars that were available to guests. There, all the cars were the same. All the cars have stayed the same over the years. I'll tell you that right now. All 24 of them. I'm not going to tell you how much they cost. I'm just going to tell you there is exactly 24 cars altogether, because they told me so, because I worked at that attraction. And they all were red and yellow and then white. But when Chevrolet and Disney partnered up for Test Track 2.0, they decided to paint all the cars blue for Chevrolet for whatever reason. I'm not sure why they decided to do that. I also felt like the original costumes were a lot cooler versus the new costumes are basically a blue and gray shirt and then gray pants. I mean, yeah, some people will say, "Oh, I like the new costume better," but I don't know. So, from my understanding, what happened is the original was extremely popular. It was an extremely well liked attraction. It always had a long line. I don't think there was ever a day that I went to Epcot and the original attraction never had a long line. It would be, a miracle if it didn't. But unfortunately, from my understanding, Disney lost their sponsorship of Chrysler. Or GM, sorry, GM, I apologize. Disney lost their sponsorship of GM. According to what I just read, it appears that around 2009, GM and Disney were basically starting to have to figure out, or GM told Disney that you guys might have to start looking for a new partnership. If I read it correctly, it looked like GM was starting to go bankrupt around that time period, and Disney had to start looking into something else. Disney paid a ton of money for the sponsorship, which only lasted for about 10 years. Now, Disney managed to keep the sponsorship going for another 3 years until they could figure out what to do with it. Disney decided to partner up with Chevrolet, and they signed a new contract that would last 30 years, from what I read. And that's when they decided, well, we want to be more interactive. We want the guests to have something else to truly appreciate. We want the guests to be able to not just ride the ride, but to design the cars and to compete against each other. Well, ironically, you could do something just like this at Disney Quest. There was an attraction called Cyberspace Mountain where you were given a card and then you would design your own roller coaster and then you would go ride it afterwards. I mean, this is not really much different other than the fact that everything is up to date as far as your computers go. You originally you would be handed a card and then you would take that card and you would scan it to create your own ride vehicle with, and then you would scan it right before you got on the ride. Excuse me, and then you would go from there on the ride and kind of compete against each other. I did learn that back a few years ago, Disney decided, well, we're not going to hand out cards anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to allow guests to be able to use their Disney ticket that they used to buy their way in, because all Disney guests, especially these days, have to have an RFID card on them to be able to get in. RFID ticket. And since Disney uses RFID card readers even inside Test Track 2.0, they figured it made too much sense for guests just to hold their ticket up to the thing. They would scan it, and then they could scan it again just before they got on the ride. And just for the fun of it, if you didn't know this, let's say you didn't even know about that, and you go through the whole thing, and then you see those things just before you got on the ride, you're like, oh, I wonder what this is. So you decide to scan your ticket to it for whatever reason, or your magic band, or whatever. It will automatically generate a car for you to compete against everybody. Now, personally, this is the reason why I do feel like Test Track 2.0 is a downfall compared to the original. Not just because I've seen the lines go considerably down, and I'm not necessarily saying the pandemic has anything to do with it, because I've been there on days when the ride didn't really have much of a wait. Test Track and Mission Space are really the only good rides left in Future World. A lot of people are like, "Oh, what about Soaring?" I was like, "Well, Soaring's not even as good as it used to be. They got Soaring all over the world, or over the world now. And honestly, compared to Soaring over California, is not that good. It really is not. It's like trying to say Test Track 2.0 is better than Test Track the original. Well, let's look at some reasons why I say that Test Track 2.0 is not as good as the original. Let's start going through the Q line, for example. The Q line, you are looking at basically models of like future cars, future Chevrolet cars, and that's really about it. The entire line, and you're listening to the same music. I'm very sure it's Clocks by Coldplay that you're listening to the entire time that you're in the queue line, and it's just over and over and over again. I mean, it's good music, but the original Test Track queue line would put you through an actual GM testing facility, and it had a really cool upbeat music, and it kind of made me excited to go on the ride. I almost felt like I was a little more excited to go on the ride back then because of that music. Now, the pre-show these days for Test Track 2.0 is not the same as the original. The pre-show these days is where you design your car now. That's how they make sure that not too many guests are waiting to board the vehicles all at the same time. So that's why they try making you hang out in there for about 5 minutes while they try to get the line down. Not everybody believes in designing the cars. Most people are like, go on, kids, have fun. Kids love it. Most parents are just standing there playing their phones or whatever they need to do. And then they're like, oh, time to go on. And you're already almost there at that point. Or if I remember correctly, the original pre show was literally right in front of the ride. Now, they did rearrange the queue because the 2.0, you have to go up the ramp a little bit and then you're there, versus you would just go straight across. Oh, look, you're there. So they definitely redid the queue just because of the fact that they wanted to offer more with the queue, which, I can understand. And the original basically would let you talk to these two people that are going to be talking to throughout the entire ride. And they're like, oh, we want you to test out one of our vehicles too, so we're going to have you do a hill test, then we're going to have you do a couple of brake tests, a heat chamber test, then we're going to have you do an ice test or a freezer test, then we're going to have you do a erosion test, then we're going to have you do some like twists and turns and stuff like that, how your car handles curves, and then we'll throw in a surprise test. And then they pretty much send you out there after that. So they're like, all right, we're going to put you in your testing car and, hopefully you come back alive. That sort of deal. And the entire ride, you're basically going from one test to the next. Now, the new version is almost identical, except that it's a more modern, futuristic version. They're like, we're connecting to OnStar and stuff like that, and the brake test is lot better. Everything's being run by computers now. Your Temperature tests are completely different. Not to mention, there's a lot more fancy lighting everywhere because they're trying to make it look all fancy. Some people have said that Test Track 2.0 is Test Track with a Tron feel to it. I'm referring mainly to Tron Legacy, the new one that came out, not the original Tron, but I mean, you're not wrong about the original Tron either. And then the last test is basically the same. I mean, other than the fact that literally everything is blue and purple and it's got that Tron feel to it. And the fact that they went and redid some tests, it's almost the same. And I felt like it was a rush job on their part. And I was walking the attraction one day as a cast member, and they're like, "Hey, you want to see what's behind this black curtain?" And I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And I was really mad when I did see. So the reason why I was mad is because right behind that black curtain was part of World of Motion. So more or less, what they decided to do with World of Motion was they didn't completely destroy it. They decided to just cover it up. And that was just basically Disney telling me that they can't be bothered to always destroy everything. Disney likes to cut corners when it comes to money. They like to save money. They like to find excuses to save their money. So it makes sense that they would hide World of Motion behind a black curtain. So it makes you wonder if this was Test Track 2.0 that was still hiding World of Motion behind a black curtain, then how are they hiding it during the original Test Track? Did they also have that behind a black curtain? It makes you wonder. I mean, World of Motion hasn't been around in a long time. And World of Motion was there before the original Test Track was there. I don't honestly remember if I ever went on World of Motion before. It was a very slow moving ride that talked about how transportation has changed. But Disney felt like, I guess, we're getting too bored with um, slow, dark moving rides, and that's why they decided to start moving on to fast paced and adrenaline seeking rides, and that's why Disney also closed down Horizons in 2005 or so to make way for Mission Space. I remember when Mission Space was announced, and I was not happy about it. I can tell you that right now, but I have at least rode both versions. I rode the Orange Team one time, and that's all I can handle. I'll never ride on Orange Team ever again. It's pretty bad. But, anyways, which version of Test Track do you guys think is better? Do you guys think the 1999 version is better, or the 2012 version that's already 10 years old? Also, do you guys think that Test Track is going to be around for quite some time? Or do you think it's time for Disney to replace Test Track 2? I guess time will tell. And until then, I will see you guys in the next vlog. And always remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. Have a great night. Peace out.